The Rinnegan, one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, dojutsu in the world of shinobi. It was once wielded by the Sage of Six Path, the god of man, and now is currently held by Sasuke Uchiha. But how would it have changed if Naruto, the main character, had inherited this through reincarnation? Doing thus would throw off the circle of reincarnation, making us have to do more. Naruto would take the place as the sages himself reincarnate, while Sasuke would keep the reincarnate of Indra, and a new character or another character would assume the position of Ashura. How would this change the shinobi world and its workings? For the Rinnegan is way too powerful for a starting Naruto. Or is it? Find out and enjoy. We start this one off with an explanation. Our explanation today is going to be about how we are going to give Naruto the Rinnegan. So, in this story, the Rinnegan is going to be a dojutsu passed down the Uzumakian line, but is said to be so rare that only one in every few hundred or thousand Uzumaki would wield it. It's said to rival wood style in rarity, and no one really knows what causes the Rinnegan to emerge within an Uzumaki. Similar to wood style, it's a genetic mystery, and not many have understood how it works. You unlock it the same as any other dojutsu by either emotion or a life or death situation. How we're going to progress through the powers of the Rinnegan is it will start with 0 Tomo with the ability to switch it on and off or keep it on. This way it will not cause any chakra drain if one practices it enough. And for every Tomo, yes Tomo, we're going to be introducing the 6 Tomo concept. For every Tomo, one would gain a new ability. The Rinnegan itself would have the abilities to unlock every chakra nature with optimal control over said chakra natures, not really giving you it automatically, but giving you the means to start it off. Also, each Tomoe or Tomo would basically embody a new Rinnegan ability. For example, the Parada Path or the Almighty Push and Pull, depending on what the first situation would call for. So now that we have gone more or less over it, the Rinnegan would have a single side effect. As one reaches their prime, their skin tone and body would start changing, with some users of the Rinnegan even being said to have grown an extra eye or horns. So now that the explanation is done, we could properly start off this series of what if Naruto had the Rinnegan. Now to start the story itself off, we start with Minato and Kushina at the time of their death. They would be sealing the Nine Tails, or at least half of the Nine Tails, to within Naruto, and then passing along. Unbeknownst to Naruto, he has the Rinnegan, which would be sensed by the Nine Tails beast inside of him. Along with the Nine Tailed beast inside of him, there is a form of one of those men with multiple eyes and horns floating above this beast. This is the Sage of Six Paths. What had necessarily caused the reincarnation of the Sage of Six Paths was for him to try and stop the reincarnation cycle of his 2 sons. He would be there as a guide and try to stop them if necessary. He had gone through quite a few Uzumaki in his time, with them not really having any connection to him genetically. He found them perfect. They did share large chakra reserves over their clan, and their bodies were more than durable to take on the transformation of him. He had found Naruto being sealed with the Nine Tails and had decided this would be his last reincarnation, and thus his last chance to stop the reincarnation cycle and cycle of hatred bestowed upon his sons. Now Naruto, 4 years old, sits in an orphanage where he had been growing up most of his life. When the village would gain knowledge of him being the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, many would take offense child, which would mean that he would soon be removed from the orphanage. He would be kicked out and would make his way to the streets, where an angry crowd would await him. He would presume that this crowd is after him, for he didn't have the mind of a child. He thought as a warrior. He thought as something else. He thought as an adult. He knew that something had happened to trigger a disliking of him. Now he knows he needs to stay out of the way, or at least that's the conclusion that he had come to. So he would conclude that the smartest path to follow was to stick in the shadows, at least until things died down. So he would take back streets and alleyways to avoid as many crowds as possible, hopefully making his way to the forest where no one should be this time of night, when he runs into a shinobi with a bloodlusted look on his face. Naruto would hear some mumbling, but would not know the intent behind the man, as a kunai is thrown to his face and time seemingly stops. He doesn't know why time has ceased to move, but he is pulled into a sewer-like space with an old man staring him down and a nine-tailed beast behind him. Naruto would fall over, not really showing signs of fear but more of surprise, as he looks at the giant beast and the old man. The old man would tell him to calm down, with Naruto responding that he was in fact calm. The old man had forgotten how many reincarnations he went through and how all of his reincarnations were mostly mature, at least above those of normal standards. He would explain the entire situation and how he just wishes to stop the reincarnation cycle, but Naruto seems to be at a disadvantage. Where all him and his previous reincarnates were loved by the world, Naruto is not. For some reason out of his control, people feel a strong sense of hatred towards Naruto, as he had done something to them. But having been here his whole life and knowing of no such thing, all he could assume is that the people of this world had grown to hate his children, not being Ashura and Indra, but the tailed beast. He would ask for an explanation from Kurama, as Kurama would speak. He'd say that they had been captured by Madara and Hashirama not too long ago, previous reincarnations of Indra and Ashura, and had been sealed inside of humans. Not only humans grown hatred towards them for their users or their Jinchuriki for causing destruction, but they had grown hatred towards the humans, for the humans had treated them like objects, not like sentient beings, basically instilling a sense of known into the old man, being the Sage of Six Paths. He would look back down to Naruto as he said, "This is an ability I usually don't grant my reincarnations until their prime, but since you are in a situation and you're the last reincarnate I have, here, take my power." A bright glow would come from the old man's hand as he points at Naruto, Naruto feeling a pain in his eyes, peering back in the normal world, and away flies the kunai. His eyes had changed. They were purple with swirls in them, 6 tomo blazing deep, as they would disappear completely, going to a pattern of swirls alone, and then fading back to his normal eyes. Naruto would then look at the man with the bloodlusted face amped by the power of the Nine Tails, who would not be behind a seal. The Sage of Six Paths himself had destroyed the seal to have Naruto gain optimal amounts of chakra, putting him on the level of that of reincarnations of Indra and Ashura. This would guarantee a victory, or at least for him to succeed in reclaiming his son's souls. Now the man who was basically instilled with his own kunai after having thrown it at a child runs away in fear. He had hoped to gain revenge for one of his loved ones who had died in the Nine Tails attack. But Naruto, on the other hand, he had gained more tonight than lost. He would hear the old man inside of his head along with the nine-tailed fox instructing him where to go. The old man trying to find a place suitable for Naruto to stay in the time, and the tailed beast sensing emotion of hatred or any emotion at all around him, instructing him to stay away from certain places. Naruto would eventually make it into the forest, and here for a while he would reside. He was atop the Hokage monument, a place not many people had come, at least unless they wanted to go to the Great Library, which was on the other side of the mountain, so he had not really much to worry about. Here he would start his adventures. He would start a form of cultivation. By meditation, he could unlock and somewhat control his chakra. The sage and the fox had explained to him as much as they could on how to manipulate chakra. Obviously, the fox did not know as much since it was a force of chakra, and the old man always had an aptitude towards it. For some reason, Naruto, unlike his previous reincarnates, didn't have an innate control over his own chakra network. So, this is where they start. Naruto finding the river that flows inside of him, the chakra network. The old sage's sixth path finding yet another disciple, and the great-tailed fox finding its first friend. Thus starts the tale of Naruto Uzumaki. Not long after this altercation, Naruto would make a steady base inside of a hollowed out giant tree. This is where he would live for the next few years. He would every now and then camp out on top of the monument, where he would cook some food and then retreat back to his den, might I call it. In this time, he had run across the third Hokage, who had offered him a house within the village, but he would reveal that he prefers out here. He might not be all that good at hunting, but small animals are all ready for the picking, and there are many of fruits and berries here that are not too poisonous, so he could survive. He had formed a connection with the old man, Hiruzen, as time progressed, that is. Now, after a 4-year time of him living in the wild, discovering himself and his chakra, being only the yin side of his chakra, meaning spiritual. Spiritual side is what comes into handy when one controls their chakra and is commonly used for genjutsu base and other type of chakra using like shadow possession and mind transfer. There is also a yang half to Naruto's chakra, but he had not yet discovered it. The sage who lives within Naruto's chakra had discovered that there is a great imbalance between his yin and yang half because of Kurama being split into both yin energy and yang energy. The yang segment of this energy would reside inside Naruto. That's why he had Naruto practice the yin side first, so he could become a natural at manipulating and controlling his chakra before moving on to the yang side, which would be physical enhancement. He would do this later on as Naruto is now preparing to leave for the academy. Anytime Naruto would not spend at the academy would be spent practicing yang release or bodily enhancement, which commonly falls under things like the super expansion jutsu, which is our only form of canonical yang usage. There are some other Kekkei Genkai that are said to be, as Jugo's clan, which is an unknown clan, is also seemingly making use of yang release, but this had not yet been confirmed canonically. So let's go back to the story. Naruto, at his first day of the academy, would seem to make understanding of everything there. If it be reading, writing, taijutsu, and even trying and progressing in some ninjutsu. The Nine Tails not inhibiting his chakra network and him spending straight 4 years learning how to control his chakra, he would be able to cast the illusion clone, which is a form of yin release, almost instantaneously. Not in the first day, but in the first few weeks, unlike a lot of other people. There would be 2 other students exceptionally good at this as well, being Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno. The 2 of them would also show feats of being near geniuses, and this would probably become a recurrent thing throughout the ages. But for right now, let's focus. Naruto would return to his forest home every night, and on the weekends would perform feats of natural energy gaining through yang release. So by absorbing chakra from the nature around him and basically amping his body with the chakra. This would lead to a later progression in nature energy, which we are not yet going to get into. Naruto would spend lots of time under waterfalls and sitting in open fields meditating. he would learn things like tree walking and water walking as precision control. He had seen many a shinobi training up in the mountains, for it was more quiet than the average battleground. So he had there been witness to a lot of things, if it be actual jutsu like fire and water style, or if it be things like chakra control, walking over rivers, and sticking to trees. Naruto had seen one specific jutsu he was really interested in, called the water bullet. It seemed to work oddly, but he thinks that it might come in useful in the future, and would attempt to generate water chakra, which for some reason he would immediately take onto, and would eventually even be able to master this jutsu after a few years in the academy, being around 2 years. We skip to when he's around 10 years old, and he would not initially attempt to graduate early, but he had established a friendly rivalry with fellow student Sakura and fellow student Sasuke. In this story, a lot of things differ. Sakura, for chance, is not a Haruno or a civilian. She was adopted by the Haruno household after she came from a clan which was not specified. For this specific story, she will be from the Senju clan. I know a lot of people dislike Sakura along with myself, but I really do want everyone to shine separately. In this specific series, Sakura will be the reincarnation of Ashura, while Sasuke stays the reincarnation of Indra. Naruto would be there to overlook these two as the reincarnation of Hagoromo. Hagoromo, with inside of Naruto, would sense his two children within these two, but he wouldn't make much mention of it. He would now just forcibly train Naruto to be better than them. Obviously, this is not to make them feel beneath him or anything, but to make sure that when it comes down to it, he could help them settle the difference. So, here is the difference between an Uzumaki, a Senju, and an Uchiha. This is the reincarnation cycle that we will be going forth with, which might change some ships in the future. So, now that Naruto had met his future rivals, he could go back to training. They had learned yet another jutsu within the academy, being the transformation jutsu. Naruto would feel off while using this jutsu as his body is rejecting it. He had been focusing solely on yang energy, so his yin half had slipped away. He could still perform yin jutsu like the transformation and clone jutsus, but it just felt unnatural for him. And Hagoromo had seen this coming because Naruto had now recreated that imbalance between his yin and yang half of chakra, with the yang half being dominant. He knows that Naruto would have to stick to a lot more yang-based techniques, so he might help Naruto transmute the jutsu that would necessarily be yin release into that of yang release, since jutsu is something that exists within chakra itself. So there is nothing quite saying that you can't take a genjutsu and make it affect physical reality, as we know from high yin release users like the Kurama clan, which we won't actually be going into. I just used it per example. So now Naruto's goal would be transmuting any jutsu of yin release quality into that of yang release, starting with the transformation jutsu. Hagoromo would be curious if you could take this illusion of transformation and turn it into a physical form of itself, meaning your body would physically be able to morph into that of someone or something else. Of course, he'd be curious on if you could turn into an animal, which one could, which would play into one of the later paths evolving. Hagoromo himself would not have the path necessarily, because we're going to be changing this story a lot. Naruto would be the first user of the Rinnegan to unlock said paths, but Hagoromo had always known for the potential. The paths, or the 6 paths, would be different for every user, and for some reason, he feels a disturbance within chakra itself. Like somehow there are 2 of himself in place. Maybe this has to do with a future or alternate user, being Nagato, of course. For our story would be a lot different. We will be including Naruto being able to sense Nagato, and Nagato be able to sense Naruto, vice versa, all that type of things. So the interactions between them would be a lot different. This might also initiate Nagato to feel he has to do something about this threat he feels, for it would feel opposing, like this is striving for the opposite thing that he is. Obviously, he would think that this is evil, but this is Naruto striving for good. Unbeknownst to Nagato, he'd be the one striving for evil. He cannot necessarily tell that there's another Rinnegan user, but he can tell that there is someone out there that's meant to oppose him. So he would make sure to prepare. This Nagato would not abuse the paths as much and would more or less stay fit throughout the years, gaining and sustaining his youthful body. He would not be worn down as much as he'd be a lot more physical, and the only paths he would possess were two paths. These being the path of almighty push and pull and the path of healing. He feels that these are the two most useful ones that he would not be using himself too often. So these would be the two that supported him. He would appear in things like Akatsuki meetings, so that would change the form of the Akatsuki as well. But this is not a video about the Akatsuki, so let's get back to the point. Now Hagoromo sits thinking. He had been sitting in this meditative position for what seems to be days, as his son the Ninetales would finally question him, why he had been in this state for so long. Hagoromo would sigh as he decides to explain. Naruto up until this point had not been like the rest of his reincarnations. All his reincarnations would specialize in yin release, giving them a stronger connection to his spirit. But Naruto on the other hand has a stronger connection to yang release, which he worries might speed up the process of Naruto taking his form. Kurama would question this and Hagoromo would explain. Up until now, every single one of his reincarnates had gained his form, as he had in his younger years. The Otsutsuki DNA or chakra that courses through their veins is similar to a parasite. It would forcibly change you into one of them, and usually this would be through something his mother had called a karma seal. He is not sure if she had ever implanted one, but he knows that this would be a way for an Otsutsuki to escape their own dying bodies. But he had never wanted to resort to this until the reincarnation state. He had never thought that this would cause what it does, but so far he had never taken over any of their bodies. All his reincarnates at this point had died before the process was completely fulfilled. So he doesn't even know if this process finishes, if Naruto would survive or not. Either way, he would have to train Naruto to his peak. Hagoromo himself up until this point had specialized in yin release. Yes, he had control over yang release, having even put them together to create yin-yang release, the creation of all things through equivalent exchange, but he did not specialize in one particularly. Naruto did early on show a mastery over yin release, but not as close to his mastery over yang release. Naruto, up until this point, had been able to shift his body into that of someone else's, or even turn into an animal, which is something Hagoromo himself had never been able to do. He had even been able to split his chakra into segments and then have that chakra solidify similar to a tailed beast. This is something like a progenitor to yin-yang release. This is equivalent exchange, but it can't necessarily create anything. It looks like Naruto is limited until he unlocks his full Rinnegan, something Hagoromo had never even done himself. Naruto, on the other hand, had made a concept similar to the cloning jutsu. He would necessarily create an illusion or chakra in the form of himself, which would disperse in a simple touch, but would enhance it with yin and yang chakra, making it sustain its form with the yin and controlling its movements through mental connection, and using yang to its most powerful would solidify it as it being its own being. He could control the amount of chakra he had put into them, and these could range anywhere from genin to high tuning level. He himself had not yet surpassed high tuning level, so if he split himself into two, he would be classified as 2 tuning at the very least. But he was not too adamant on revealing all his abilities early on. He had stuck to the normal clone and illusion jutsu for tests and anything similar in school, and due to his cognitive functions, could adapt to mostly anything. Hagoromo's worries further continue past the fact that since that first night, Naruto had not yet been able to once again awaken his Rinnegan. Maybe that was a fluke, or maybe Naruto needs something to once again incentivize him to unlock it. As far as Hagoromo can see, Naruto isn't trying to hold it back, but it just seems like it doesn't want to emerge. Maybe this has something to do with his affinity towards yin release. Maybe he has to focus more. But no, that would not be the case. Naruto has something wrong. For some reason, his Rinnegan just doesn't want to unlock. But he will unlock it. He will force it open if he has to. And Kurama would sit and watch as the kid he grows to know as his first friend evolves along the path of a shinobi. Hagoromo now grows tired and would go into a deep meditation to restore the chakra he had lost. He might not be able to reincarnate again, but he could at least stay around for a little while longer. He will return when Naruto emerges with the Rinnegan. Now he fades away as Naruto wakes up. But if you want this series to continue, then make sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below. I did go through multiple incarnations of this script, and I know a lot of people are going to be mad at the fact that I made Sakura Ashura's reincarnation. I was considering reincarnating Hamura and giving that to Hinata, but I decided I'd rather use that later on in the story for another character. So, for now, I really do hope y'all did enjoy this script, and I do hope y'all enjoyed the new editing theme. So, yeah, if y'all do want to support me, consider becoming a member or joining my Discord. Links will be down in the description. Thank you to the boy Steak for editing this beautiful video. Thanks to the Dragon Lord for creating our intro and outro. Speaking of, roll that outro.
1, 2, 3, let's go!
Subscribe for more.
Yada yada does it.
Thank you to Jaquan Jones, Luida Uwu, King J, and Pop Pop for becoming first tier members. And a big shout out to the second tier members, Sam Cross, Archimedes Eisen, and Avery Swearingen, aka the second tier members, aka the Clan Warriors.
And hey, if you want to become a member, scroll down from the video and click the join button, or alternatively scroll down to this link. Members get videos anywhere from 24 hours to a week early.